interrupt and ask for specific words if necessary. And I just want to introduce this by saying that most of you know a lot about reactor risks and the physical side of it, the natural science part of it. But I'm going to widen your perspective somewhat today by providing some new, for you, I suppose, quite new arguments, which are, I'm sure, very helpful if properly used. And for me, as an economist, even more important argument than the risks, because there's always a trade-off between risk and rewards. And that's an important thing for me. I'll come back to that. I also say that I have a copy of this speech available in English. You can have later on if you want to. It's only 4 pages, just summarizing my thoughts today. To make a very short summary, I make the following statement, that nuclear energy is not cheap, as is often claimed, nor does it produce a better life, more welfare or higher wages. In fact, we would hardly notice if it disappeared. And it's not even needed for sustainability. That's today's lingo for thinking about resource exhaustion and that sort of thing. It's not needed for that purpose at all. That's the short shine of my message. So, shall we proceed to some details? The welfare illusion. The welfare illusion is one of the biggest questions to my mind. And they learn how to understand how markets work. The competitive system, the capitalist system, if you like. And the basic fact is that electricity produced by coal and nuclear power, nuclear reactors, always have the same price, or roughly the same price, always. And will continue to do so for generations to come, as long as these two alternatives exist. And they will exist for a long period of time, 30, 40, 50 years. And this, we can call this a price parity principle. And that can be, you can recall the familiar fact that 2 cars with the same motor size and quality have the same, roughly the same price tag. The same thing with electricity, whether coming from coal and nuclear energy. The price is the same. And that, an important conclusion from that statement is that that explains why the choice between coal, for example, and nuclear power does not affect electricity prices, and nor even standard of living in individual countries. And therefore, the choice between the two and everything else can be made on other considerations, not matter of price and cost, but other considerations. For example, environmental impact being one of the important things. Some fortunate states, like Norway, Sweden, Iceland, and Arab states having natural gas, they don't have to use any of these 2 major alternatives, which are coal and nuclear. And since they are also richly endowed with other resources, hydropower and natural gas. And in such cases, electricity prices can be a bit cheaper than elsewhere in the world. In such cases, a country can have a comparative, as we call it, economists, a comparative advantage in electricity prices. But the interesting thing is that advantage, and we had that advantage in Sweden for a long time, when we used all the hydro energy, right? But the same day as we introduced nuclear energy, that advantage was lost. Because then the price is set by nuclear power cost, not by hydro energy costs. That's how the market works. Let me say also that at the global level, increased supply of whatever energy source you have may have a positive impact by lowering prices of coal. Increased supply reduce the price of coal. But under one condition, that is that the new alternatives stand on their own. They are not subsidized by countries or otherwise. And that is not the case with nuclear energy, as we will see. And it's also the case that nuclear is not cheaper than anything else, but it's neither more expensive. In that case, it wouldn't exist, right? Simple. So it's wrong to speak about cheap and expensive, with the exception mentioned, it's cheap and expensive energy. And also in a country like Sweden, we may have some sources like our best hydro stations. They have a very low production cost. But that's of no relevance. Why? Because the price is set at the margin. Price equals marginal cost, not average cost. That's one very basic thing in economics. And this is a very, very elementary principle, but still it creates a lot of confusion in the Swedish debate. And then can you imagine how much confusion is created when we start to discuss more complicated economic issues, when people don't even understand this, even politicians at high levels. My second point is that nuclear energy has never been a commercial product. It has never been a commercial product. It has always been a state-supported product. Always, in all countries. To a higher or lesser degree, it has been subsidized by states, never standing on its own. And there are two forms of support or subsidies, and the most important one is the state guarantee. The states, most of them, have guaranteed to pay the cost for nuclear accidents above a certain very low level. So if you have a meltdown costing 20 million or 30 million, the company will pay only a couple of billions. The rest is paid by the taxpayer. And that's a huge subsidy. It's a huge subsidy. Because, first of all, no insurance company to date has dared to issue a policy, what's it called, to guarantee
full cost.
Yes, a full cost insurance policy. No countries done that. The other thing is, the other subsidy is advantages through the tax system, energy tax systems, which are beneficial to the electricity industry. Let me mention, for example, that the tax on coal in Sweden is 8 times higher than the tax on electric heating. 8 times. 8 times. And think about what that means for the companies involved. And Sweden also, we have had a lot of cheap loans, pension fund money in the 70s, 80s, financing the investments in this industry. Then we have a question about if this industry is not viable on its own, why did it start from at all? What set the train in motion, so to speak? And I think it's a mixed bag of circumstances. One important thing is that the US government, after the war, had to consider what to do with all these high-skilled technicians and scientists who had been developing the bomb, and they decided the best thing was to let them build civilian electricity or electricity for private use. They could reduce the feelings of the guilt feelings from the bomb explosion. And the destructive forces that is behind this Faustian deal, which the atomic power always has been and still is. My fourth point is to compare risks and rewards. Nobody questions the enormous risk involved in nuclear technologies, but the difficult side is to determine the reward side of the equation. And I've been touching on that already. These rewards are highly exaggerated and do clearly not justify the high risks involved. We can compare with the traffic situation, cars and trucks, for example, also creating a lot of accidents on roads, but still morally acceptable because of the huge benefits from the transportation systems. But still, we have to object to the highest levels, of course, but it's a difference between the two. When comparing risk is also a difficult thing, because you hear from the nuclear industry all the time that that fossil fuels is so and so many times more dangerous than nuclear energy, right? But then you have to define the risk, how to count the risks. And you have to apply proper weights to various aspects of the risks. And to give more attention to problems that are difficult to solve than to more trivial matters. Easy to access and mainly a result of government neglect, for example, e.g. oil tanker accidents and minor accidents, which is almost always a result of negligent management from governments or companies involved. My fifth point is we have as a movement a new competitor, shall we say, a new competitor and a very difficult competitor, and that is the issue of climate change. This has been a non-issue for many years, and but it suddenly became the key thing. Always, all over the world, recognized as the most important threat to the world. And this is also the only remaining argument the nuclear industry have. That's the most valuable argument they have today. They have nothing else to speak for. And therefore it's important to scrutinize these claims by Al Gore, IPCC, and other proponents of the greenhouse horror stories. Because if this doctrine is generally accepted, we will have problems. The nuclear industry will flourish, and the opposition will have problems. But if we can refute these claims, the opposite outcome is likely. And let me assure you, false science it is. False science it is, no question about it. I think you will speak more about it later. I think we have a first hint in what is called the climate scam. These mails between the English professor and the IPCC and what's going on between them. But more important to me is that a number of scientists are beginning to speak up. Of course, this is nothing new, because this has been under the carpet for a long time, but they're speaking up now. And that will hopefully make people recognize what we all knew for 15 years ago, that nuclear energy is more more dangerous than fossil fuels. So this is now the decisive political question. Can carbon dioxide really be a bigger threat to mankind than nuclear energy? That's the basic issue we have to respond to. And of course it's not, even what we know today. And the climate issue also has another aspect, new dimension than hypocrisy, because the political action taken on with treaties like Kyoto, similar measures at the EU level, and even by individual governments like Swedish government, they do not reduce global emissions at all. They pretend to do it, but they don't do it. They don't deliver. So it's a fake altogether. Because, and the simple reason is that you can only reduce emissions by total participation, global participation. Otherwise it doesn't work. That's very basic and simple. And the Swedish mantra of going first, going before, showing the way, it is also totally meaningless, because the only thing you do is wasting a lot of taxpayers' money, because it doesn't change anything at all. What we say here is consumed and emitted elsewhere. That's all very basic economics. You reduce demand on one side and you lower price, and the lower price increases consumption elsewhere. And we can also, when talking about priorities, we can compare this non-result with the very important progress we can make by cleaning up dirty coal power stations and converting electric heating in our homes into heat systems. Not using electricity at home, but heat. Biomass or even oil is necessary in the cities, but biomass basically in Sweden. That also brings us to the next question of importance of making priorities. The world faces very many different problems, and we can't solve them all at once. We have to make priorities, and the more sober look at the global issue, the climate issue, you can't avoid the conclusion that reducing local risks is more important than anything else, than tackling global emissions of dioxide at this point. And here I will stick out my head a little bit by also claiming that green parties and organizations have a tendency to demand everything at once. I don't think that's a very good realistic approach. And it's more likely to be counterproductive, as we have seen in the climate debate, by accepting Kyoto and the thinking in Copenhagen and the Swedish climate policies. You actually support nuclear energy. Think about it. That's what you do. You give them a good argument. Or let them keep the only argument they have. But it's a difficult issue, and it's not clear-cut what to think and what to do, but that's my position on this. Let me also add a few words. I'll say something about the Swedish nuclear disaster. This is the book I wrote in 2002. I think it's still true, even more true today, because the losses are increasing for every day. Today, by new billions, not billions, English billions, Swedish miljarder, wasted on, for example, the support to wind power, which is far too expensive today. It can be used in the long run, and it's much more expensive than nuclear energy. But it's not a good thing today. It's not a good thing, because we just increase the big oversupply of energy. That's the only thing we do. And to make a short summary of that book is that this 12-reactor program means that all the money invested and much, much more has been lost. Not 50%, not 70%, but the total amount, and much, much more. And I say, you don't need to be referring to the introduction. You don't have a master degree in economics to understand this. This is quite simple. I mean, not for everybody, but for ABC students in economics. Because the only thing you have to do is to distinguish between real money and thin air. Real money and thin air. Real prices, nominal prices, real profits and nominal profits. That's a huge difference. Vattenfall claims it's making 8 billion or whatever a year in profit. It's actually losing real money every year. It's losing money every year. If you make the analysis in real money, considering the value of the capital invested over a period of years. And to give another small hint of this disaster is that we today have a generating capacity in Sweden of around 170 terawatts, TWH. While the free market optimum with neutral tax systems, without subsidies, that would be somewhere between 110 and 120. That's my estimate in this book. Has not been objected to by anybody, not by anybody. So we have a huge overcapacity, which is almost as large as what the reactor industry can produce today. So almost the whole reactor capacity is a surplus. So my conclusion is that in the free market, Sweden would have built not a single reactor. We built 12. We should not have built a single one, or at least not more than 1 and 2. Or had we built 6, these companies had been bankrupt at once if they had to stand on their own feet without subsidies. They've been bankrupt all long ago. And this overinvesting business, how did it work? How did its losses come about? The losses came about because when a company had this overcapacity, they had to dump the product on the market by lowering prices. And that's what they did. For 20 or 30 years, they have been selling nuclear energy at roughly half the cost of production. Real cost of production. Not nominal cost of production, but real cost of production. So that's
you maybe should explain which costs they are not considered, the research and
the difference between is the way you consider inflation. 1 billion 30 years ago is the same as 10 billion today, right? So if you started investing 1 billion 30 years ago, you should today pay interest on 30 billion, 10 billion, 1 and 10, roughly. Most companies, many companies count that way when you have depreciation on replacement cost. You depreciate the replacement cost, not the original cost of investment, you see? So then you charge a cost for replacing what was built 30 years ago. That's the correct thing to do.
Feminine.
Yep.
you're a national economist, and the things you're explaining to us now are quite technical. But your point is, Sweden has lost billions of crowns by going all out on nuclear.
Yeah.
They had more nuclear power plants per capita than any other country. So how much money have they lost by investing so heavily in nuclear?
Yeah. Well, my estimate is that we have lost around 300 billion Swedish crowns. 300 billion. We invested roughly 150 and we have lost 300 roughly.
It's better you say milliards because people here don't know.
Miljarder.
Yes.
I have a question on this too. You said that all countries have subsidies that are state subsidies. Is that correct? Because United States, don't they have private companies that build the nuclear power plants? And how many dollars goes into those plants? That's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The government, US also have that state guarantee. They also have the state
I know
guarantee.
that. Yes, I know.
You know that.
Yeah.
They don't have our high taxes on oil and coal, on fossil fuels. Not the same high tax, no. But I was talking about Sweden then, I said we have three
And
times.
they don't pay for the technique that the government developed.
No, because in the United States they have closed down a lot of nuclear plants that we are not able to do in Sweden because it's the government that decides for us. So there is a difference between all the countries, and I would like to ask about France too. What is the situation in France? Who is the owner, and what money goes into those plants?
France is basically state-owned.
Yes, they all of them.
Most of the, I think all regular owned by the state.
Okay.
And the same guarantee they have there.
Okay.
And that's very, very important. We wouldn't be able to exist otherwise without that guarantee.
Yeah, but there is a difference in the price in France and in Sweden, isn't it?
It's a bit slightly higher prices. Yeah, even not just now, but roughly it's been very much higher than that. Let me also give you one more example about this manipulation and going on. That is, when nuclear power was introduced, Birgitta Dahl, you know her, right?
Yeah.
She was telling everybody that if you invest, convert your house into electric panels, you will save a lot of energy, right? Remember? Remember? No, you don't remember. No, that's a big lie. And the simple mathematics between it is that they are adding, and also SEB made the same false calculation about total energy consumption. They added 1 unit of heat and 1 unit of electricity and claimed that this is 2 units of energy. You understand the mistake? Because 1 unit of electricity represents 3 units of heat, right? It takes 3 units of uranium to produce 1 unit of electricity, right? So, just false, they're even faking the statistics.
2 minutes.
Yep, 2 minutes, I finish. Let me also mention there's the thinking that despite all these losses to the country as such, Aktiebolaget Sweden, so if you say, has lost these 300 billion. Well, some people said, okay, but we have been able to use this energy cheaply, right? There's also a fake argument. Why? Because it's not the same people involved. The cost has been paid by the taxpayer, these loss of 300 billion, and some sectors of society has gained, like the energy-heavy industries, steel and forest. So there's been a huge transfer of wealth and income from the general public to a small sector of industry. That's the truth. Okay, I think I can end there. I'm running out of time. I suppose
One or two questions will always lighten up the understanding of your point. So is there anyone who has a question?
Yeah, please, if you didn't understand something, please feel welcome. 1 minute for questions. Yeah,
How would
please.
your economic analysis run for hydropower? How would your economic analysis is with the
hydropower.
economic loss? How would, if you would do it on hydropower, which is also quite large scale,
Yeah.
what would be the consequences?
I mean, no, we can't speak about losses in hydro energy really, because you see the basic thing is that we built 60 terawatt of nuclear energy, and that was lowering the price. So it made all forms of energy losing money in real terms. But the fault was this investment in nuclear. The fault was not that we built some hydro stations. But there is a connection between these two issues, because the hydro sector has lost a lot of money too in the last 20 years, because the surplus of nuclear energy has forced the companies also to invest in new hydro energy to cover the top demand in cold winters, created by the use of heating in houses. So that couldn't be coped by, nuclear couldn't cope with these tops, so they had to invest more money in hydropower. And this money is also lost. But
Okay,
it's
thank
a
you.
small sum compared to
Thank you
the
so much.
300 billion. Okay.
And I will just show that this, Åke Sundström is author of the book that is called Kärnkraften har gjort Sverige fattigare. Nuclear power has made Sweden more poor.
Poorer.
And poorer, yeah. And there are the pieces of his speech in written. We have 10 pieces. Please hold your hands and you will have it. And we go on with the next speaker, Professor Georgi Lepin. Please, translator, to take the floor to... No, we have a professional translator.
Alltså Georgi Lepin är från Vitryssland och han har arbetat 6 år frivilligt i Tjernobyl.